You need some more water?
I do. Come up for air.
There's a bottle.
All right.
You got a bottle?
Okay. We're all set. So we'll move on to the regular meeting agenda. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 28th, 2016 regular meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, that's all except Jenkins. And abstentions?
Raise your hand.
Okay.
I need some water.
We have an opportunity for public comment. There is no public present, so we'll move on to reports and discussion. We've already had our discussion on capital project financing, and we'll move on to the 2016-17 board goal development process.
So the only thing I have to say on that particular topic is that, as I've already said in my memo to you, we do not have a day, either daytime or evening, during the summer when all of us have indicated their availability to get together for a workshop. So unless somebody's schedule changes, we're gonna have to look to set a date in early September.
Do you want to try to do that now?
We can, or I can, might be easier if I just sent something out to everybody, but as long as nobody's vacation plans change since I polled you back, a couple of months ago, and if they haven't, so be it. But there just is not a date. I mean, the only possibility, and I shudder to mention it, but I will, would be like getting together the morning of or the afternoon before a board meeting that night. I mean, those are literally the only dates when all of you, because that's why we set those dates for board meetings, because people were going to be there. So, I mean, this has happened some years through no one's fault. It's just our schedules don't mesh this summer. So, and it wouldn't be the first time. Certainly not a perfect thing, but it wouldn't be the first time where we were meeting in the early fall to try to set our agenda for the year. So, I'm in a quandary here as to where to go beyond pushing it out.
So I saw a hand from Deirdre. Or-
Well, I was just
Okay.
gonna say, like, should we think about meeting, if it's possible, even that night, like 5:30-ish before a meeting? I mean, some of the agendas are, if you project forward, may not be that full.
If people find that is more desirable than waiting until September to do that, that's really the only other option that's on the table for getting together in the summer.
Lisa?
I endorse that suggestion. I think it's more important for us to start the goal-setting process earlier. And in fact, I think it's the goals overall work better for us when we have.
True.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had your hands.
Laura?
It's fine with me if we meet before a board meeting. My concern about 5:30 as a time is that traditionally we've set aside 3 hours for this brainstorming session. So I don't know if we can get it done in 2 hours, but at least we can get the ball rolling.
Or do it by, I don't know if people's work schedules permit it.
I can
All right, so Diane's hand first.
Yeah, I definitely think we should do it earlier. I mean, maybe it was better when people can be free to take those meetings. Wait with the call.
Could that possibly work for those of you who maybe work a more traditional work day? I mean, we've worked around Mark's schedule for committee meetings. Steve, I don't know your work schedule well enough at this stage of the game. I would reinforce the fact that I believe it's critical that we're all there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I haven't looked at the calendar for work days before board meetings, but as long as I know ahead of time, it shouldn't be a problem. Steve, did you?
Yeah, I'm gonna do the same, so.
Okay.
Okay, so
Send out.
what I'll do is I'll send everybody out an email. I'll go back and look through the calendar again, and I'll send you a couple of those meeting dates and be thinking about a start time when we could get together and do it. We can always bring in, something for dinner, so we can just, and yeah, I mean, typically, this is a fairly heavy agenda, and especially with having Chuck's presentation, hopefully the second one in July and or the first one in August would be a little less jam-packed with stuff, and it wouldn't be too much of a burden on us. So I'll send everybody out those dates, recheck your schedule, think about a time, and we'll see if we can squeeze a date out of one of those anyway.
Deirdre?
Also, I was just going to say, if we could sort of be as open-minded as possible about when that 3-hour block might happen. Could it be a morning meeting? Could it be a breakfast meeting? Could it be a lunch? I mean, I think if we all have plenty of time in terms of lead up, we should be trying to think flexibly about. I think we can do better work in a way if we're not anticipating all sitting together for like 5 hours in a row, but maybe other people feel like that's great and we get on a roll. So just flexibility.
Do we have an obligation for a public hearing at the next board meeting?
We do for the code of conduct, but it's typically only a 10 or 15 minute. I mean, it's not.
Okay. I just don't want to
Shouldn't be a big deal.
put the board goals on the agenda
Yeah.
and then say, oh wait, we have to have a public hearing too.
Yeah.
So. Diane?
Say it would probably speed up the process and people would circulate ideas first.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Deirdre?
So how do we want to do that? Just if anyone just has ideas, we'll just share it with each other, or like I'm just like whoever wants to start, we'll do it, and then we'll keep
We did
the
that
same
last
email
year.
thread. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And we would, people just have topics and.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to use the board president as the clearinghouse?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I can
can-
serve that function too, whatever Mark wants to do.
If you want, circulate your ideas to everybody and I'll just keep a running list of what they are so that we have a document with the ideas on it so that
We're not
we can look
starting
at
with a
it.
blank slate, right? Sounds good.
Okay?
Yeah?
All right. Board committee reports. We have the curriculum committee.
That's me. We just basically had one item on our agenda, which was to get an update from Marvin Krebs about this project charter. And you probably recall we talked about this earlier in the year, the Innovation and Technology Explorations project charter for the middle school. And Marvin really wanted to kind of go over the history of the funding and the implementation of this project, reminding us even, sort of how thinking had changed in the last 2 years around what was the best way for curriculum to interact with technology in the middle school years. He reminded us that funding came through in the middle of the summer, late in July, and obviously the lab itself was still under construction in the middle school when the fall semester began in 2015. So it was really kind of a retrospective of the past year. He spoke to the fact that there were setbacks both in terms of curricular planning and the physical plant, but even so, he is optimistic. The work that's been underway with Lori Keating, with faculty members, is robust and is going on not only in the middle school but also at Chancellor. You may recall that we discussed during the course of the last year the fact that MAPS testing was taking place in the computer lab. That was disruptive for several weeks, and there are active plans to avoid that kind of disruption moving forward, which is certainly very important. Marvin concluded that we have better programming, better use of productivity software, and better developed units on digital citizenship. And that being said, he isn't where he wants to be yet with this curriculum. He describes this kind of enterprise level is what he's aiming for in the district. And he wanted to reiterate the promise and commitments that have been made in 2015 as still guiding work over the course of the summer. He had very concrete benchmarks for August in terms of that work. Both Laura and I emphasized strongly in our conversations that communicating out the work that's being done is very, very important. Obviously, there's kind of a point of connection to the communications committee there, but we do want to share with families in our district the kinds of new experiences that are being made available for students, particularly with the very generous support of the Rhinebeck Science Foundation. So he pointed out there would be a very strong opportunity when the web presence is well established, and that we need to continue to invest in those resources. Ongoing professional development is, of course, to be expected. And then we just got a little taste from Marvin in terms of what's happening with SED around the revised standard for math, ELA, and social studies. They're still gathering feedback from practitioners in the field, and there's a lot of conversation going on, for instance, right now in the elementary school around the new math curriculum and where to go in terms of a move away from everyday math and what that would look like. So we, the new members and the old members, will be reading these documents and discussing them with Marvin, and obviously we'll share them with the rest of the board soon.
Lisa?
Could you just tell me what was meant by the term enterprise level?
Do you want to speak to that, where this language comes from in terms of how Marvin's using it?
Yeah, so Marvin uses that sort of as the gold standard where he wants to be. And we're not there yet. There's still plenty of work to do to try to figure out what's working, what's not working. And there's a goal and there's an end point. And I think Marvin feels like by the end of the coming school year, they will have reached, at least they've gotten closer to the gold standard where they'd like to be.
Well, did he say anything substantive about what he meant by that then?
I think it's about understanding where the kids are in the classes, with the project as it was envisioned. There was a tremendous need identified to try to level every kid's understanding of technology. As the tech plan and the chancellor is growing and getting stronger, those kids are coming in with that knowledge base. So there's some shifting of how, now what are we going to do, because the incoming sixth graders are better at keyboarding. So maybe we don't have to spend so much time in the sixth grade learning how to type because they've got those skills they learned at chancellor. So how do we now apply that in different ways? How are the coding classes working, and are the things that they've been trying worthwhile? There's some self-paced lessons in the lab, which may or may not be used to greatest effect, both from the student side and the teaching side. So they're looking at all of those kinds of things to try to see where we can take it.
Steve?
It was a heavy lift to get that lab up and going. I think everybody did a really good job of getting that started, and I'm looking forward to the professional development that they're going to do over the summer. One of the other aspects of that lab was really getting other teachers to have projects that the kids could go into that lab and do those kind of container application, real use part. Did Marvin talk about building that out and how that would work?
He did touch on it. He said it wasn't where he wants to see it. But
Yeah, and some teachers have done more with it.
Right.
I'm talking about the classroom teachers, not the lab teachers. And he wants to push that out and engage through the curriculum that's being worked on again this summer to engage more. There's a couple of eager beavers who've really been into it, and he wants to make sure it's spread out over the entire middle school curriculum. So yeah, he did mention that in our meeting.
Deirdre?
Definitely related to this is filling that position.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you, I'm sorry, I'm just thinking of it now, so I didn't alert you ahead of time to this question, but the status of that hire, do you know?
Slow.
Because
we've
of numbers of applicants, or?
Yeah, because of availability of people. We talked with you recall that the current, well, the newly departed teacher in that program had been a student in the SUNY Oswego program and had just completed student teaching down in this region of the state. And, you know, it was kind of discouraging. Marvin reached out and contacted the individual up at SUNY Oswego who runs that program. He reported that they had nobody in the pipeline either this year just passed or the year coming up. So the irony to me is that the whole STEM education thing has gotten more and more popular, but kids aren't going into that field in terms of education. I mean, perhaps career-wise, they can do better in the private sector than they can in the school sector, but you know, we had hoped, quite frankly, to try to the word that's on the tip of my tongue is a word that I wouldn't use in public. But we were trying to engage some teachers who are currently teaching this program in other schools regionally or even in other parts of the state who might want to come here because we have a very good reputation, generally speaking, and this would be an opportunity for that individual to essentially run his or her own program. But the response thus far has not been nearly as robust as we had hoped it might be. And we've also cast our net wider. I mean, my secretary and last week, Meg Tedisco, who was subbing for her, spent much of the last couple of weeks contacting higher education schools across the state. We put a full court press on running newspaper advertisements across the state, which we very rarely do these days because a lot of people are hitting the digital, you know, the OLAS and the Duchess bulletin boards with all these postings. But we figured, you know what, we gotta leave no stone unturned here. So we've been spending some money on print ads as well as the digital postings. I mean, they're not beating our doors down. I just have to be honest about that. So we're keeping our fingers crossed, but right now we're doing about as much as I can imagine us doing.
So Oswego says they basically just don't have students enrolling in teacher training for this area.
Yeah. And at least if they're enrolled, they're not at the student teaching end of the continuum, so the pickings are slim. You know, we were able to snag our last teacher who was doing his student teaching just that spring, and but there's nobody out there doing this, at least not from Oswego, and that's one of the main institutions of higher learning that's churning out people. Well, they're not churning them out, that's the problem. But they have a program for that certification, and they're just not putting them out. Steve?
Is there a link on the website with the job description that we could link to post on Facebook and our own social media?
Sure, yes.
There is?
Yeah, yes, sure. We post them on our own website regularly, and then, as I mentioned before, we've had a lot of success over the last couple of years with using the OLAS site. I don't know, it's an acronym for something that I couldn't spit out right now, but it's basically the job site run by the Westchester BOCES, and that's generated a lot of good leads for us for teaching positions and administrative positions. So we've been hitting that heavy, but it's not generating what we'd like to see, 10, 15, 20 applicants. I mean, we're getting a handful, and they're not, we're getting people who are, a handful of people who are certified in computer technology, not the hands-on pre-engineering STEM technology piece of it. And that's really what we want. I mean, you can get somebody who's a whiz with computers, but put in that situation, they really wouldn't know which way to go. So that's our quandary right now. But we'll keep at it. Keep at it. But thanks for asking.
Okay. Any other questions for curriculum? All right. Move on to good news.
Gee, how much more good news do you guys want? We are, I think, good news. We are towards the end of what I hope will be a successful search for our next director of special education. Laura's been part of that process. We've had a stakeholder group of 8 other individuals, including parent, staff from all 3 buildings, administrators. Marvin is also serving on that committee, and we had a good turnout this time around 37 applicants. We identified 10 individuals who had both special education background and administrative experience. Again, the background and the administrative experience varied. So we started out with 10. We had 3 people spurn our invitation. 1 got a job someplace else. The other 2 of them dropped out for reasons that they didn't give us. But we actually interviewed 7 reasonably strong candidates last Thursday and yesterday. It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it, Lauren? I don't know why. And we're bringing 3 of them back on Friday, and I'm optimistic that I'll have a recommendation to make to the board for appointment on the 26th of July, which will get that person here before the start of school. So I'm
Excellent.
I'm feeling pretty good about that, actually.
Laura?
Joe, if I could just add that
Sure.
The committee felt that the 7 applicants that we met and we interviewed were all incredibly capable.
Yeah.
So we're not scraping to
Good.
be pleased with the choice. It was really great.
Nice to be able to kind of nitpick over.
Yeah.
I think we agreed after interviewing 7, there were like 5 people that we all said, yeah, they could do the job. Now it's time to pick the best of the bunch.
Right.
So I think we'll knock on wood. I think we'll do okay.
Very good, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been good, and the committee has been great too.
And unanimous.
Yeah.
All right, other good news? Diane?
I know in the Poughkeepsie Journal, several of our spring athletes were recognized all-star categories.
That's right. Very good.
And somebody today posted on our website a really impressive list of where our kids are going to, both to school and or other endeavors, class of 2016. So you might want to take a look at that if you get a chance. We don't connect the names of students with the locations for reasons of confidentiality, but the list taken at face value is pretty impressive, as it most years is.
I noted you tweeted that.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Yeah, getting my tweeting finger back in. It's been a long spring.
All right.
So that's good news.
Any other good news? All right, we'll move on to old business. Deirdre?
Yes, I just want to note, it would seem that I know the communications committee, and I'm certain, even though I'm not on the facilities committee, would be meeting this summer. So now that those
And school start.
committees have been reconstituted, we'll need to
Yep.
schedule that.
So you know what I'm doing with my workday, part of my workday tomorrow. Now that,
Managing everyone's schedules.
well,
right?
yeah, we'll get the goal setting thing in the works, and then you'll be getting emails from me, multiple emails from me for each of our committees saying what's your availability. Do you want to meet during the summer? Some committees, as you pointed out, I think are more critical to meet
Right.
this summer because there's a time sensitivity to their work. some of the other committees, maybe not so much. You'll tell me when you're available and what your interests are in meeting sooner rather than later, and then we'll schedule those. Again, for Steve's benefit, what we try to do, it's not always successful because lots of us have conflicting obligations, understandably, and you're all volunteers, so we all get that. But what we try to do for each of the board committees is to nail a particular day and time each month. And again, sometimes we have to change that to flex with people's schedules, but, for example, Communication Committee will meet on the second Friday of the month at 12 noon. And everybody kind of says, yeah, that'll generally work for me. So then we just block them out on the calendar, and as we have to move them, we move them. So that's what I'll be engaging you in that over the course of the next couple of weeks as well, to see if we can land on some days and times of day each month when we might be able to meet more often than not, so.
And can I follow that up with, I'm a little concerned about the ambitious schedule for the referendum, the building referendum, just, knowing that just learning tonight that October 11th, we need to make the seeker resolution. So, I appreciate the work that the facilities committee is going to have to do, but I'm just sort of like noting aloud that we really will need, updates from facilities on the parameters that are being considered for the project, because one of the big, the big question mark is, what do we think collectively our voters are willing to potentially accept? And we haven't had that discussion. Obviously, we're just learning all the numbers. So I think an opportunity to really mull that over is going to be important. And I, right now, not being in facilities, don't know, which one is more likely or not, in terms of the needs of the district. So keep giving us enough time with updates so that we can really consider this carefully would be important to me.
Lisa?
May I just speak to that for a moment? So one of the things the Facilities Committee did at its most recent meeting was make a plan for what the workflow is going to be for the summer, so that at the beginning of September, we'd be in a position to make a recommendation to the full board as to what size of project, what the general scope of the project was going to be, so that the board could pick it up at that point. And, one thing that we're going to have to talk about at the next meeting is, the constitution of that stakeholder committee.
Yes.
So that's going to be the big thing that's going to be happening for the next 5 weeks, I would guess.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing, I'm glad you brought that up. The other thing is, you noticed, I'm sure, that appointment of an architect is on your agenda
Right.
for tonight. And as soon as you appoint them, Tom's making a call tomorrow morning saying, all right, off we go. We gotta get this thing rolling forward. And I think we're kind of at a standstill without an architect to say, all right, start coming to the meetings, start laying this out for us, start helping us make some of those value judgments on what we need to do. And I mean, we'll make the decision, but they're going to be an important part of that process. So that starts tomorrow.
Okay.
I think the other thing that's important, it is, a lot to get done in that timeframe, but, the work isn't even started for a year, so we don't want to push it off further out, I think it's too, so.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing too, not to be redundant relative to some of the reports that the Facilities Committee has made over the last several months, but we're not talking about new instructional space. We're not talking about, by and large, we're not talking about things that are going to be driving programs. We're talking about mostly infrastructure stuff, roofs and so on. So, in that sense, there's still plenty of work to be done to meet the timeline that Chuck laid out, but it's not like we're going to be having lengthy discussions about, do we need this kind of classroom or this kind of classroom, or how, we're not talking about classrooms. I mean, it's just not in the cards for us financially or otherwise, but we know in a few years, we're gonna have roofs that are gonna need attention, so we wanna try to get ahead of those things. But that said, there's a lot of headroom between 5 million and 12.5 million. And there's a lot of real estate in between those two numbers, and I think that's gonna be the challenge, as to which of those things, how many of those things, how much of those needs do we think our community can support. So that's the work.
All right, other old business? All right. Again, there is no public present. Move on to other.
The other I would mention, I did send an email out. Those of you who might be interested in attending the NISBA convention, several of you have responded positively, we think cost-wise, even with the cuts we made to the board's PD budget. That was in part cuts to a budget figure that was actually higher than we had this coming year, so we peeled that back to the same level. And again, we anticipate some savings given the fact that it's in Buffalo and the housing costs and the meal costs will be less. The transportation costs might be a little higher because we're driving more miles that way than we would be driving south, but I don't think significantly more. That people, if people went this past year, we can, and thanks to Mary Ann and Tom for pulling some of those figures together, we should be able to make it happen for those of you who want to go. So you just need to tell us. Obviously, it's less expensive if you can commit earlier than if you're not able to commit to later, but you do what you're able to do. And again, let us know, because I would want to see Mary Ann put the paperwork in once and not have to be doing a new registration and a new hotel arrangement every couple of weeks. So again, give it thought, let us know. I'd really like to see us make a move on this by the next board meeting, in a couple of weeks, if people could really check their schedules and make a decision. And there's no obligation, obviously. I mean, people can't go or don't want to go. That's their decision. And there's always good stuff there. So I've always walked away from there with something that I didn't know before I went there. So I think it's worthwhile. And Buffalo is lovely that time of year, actually. Seriously, the winds haven't started howling across the lake quite yet. And I shouldn't have said that, because I may have just jinxed it. Sorry,
Remember
guys.
this now, Joe.
All right, forget I said that. Rewind the tape.
All right, so we'll move on to
Yep.
our action items. Is there anyone who would like to remove any of the consent items from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution? Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the proposal for architectural services from Tetra Tech Engineers, Architects and Landscape Architect, PC, DBA, Tetra Tech Architects and Engineers, dated June 1st, 2016, to serve as the school district's architect of record during the 2016-17 school year, as well as to perform architectural and engineering services in connection with the district's proposed capital project, which proposal is incorporated by reference within the minutes of this meeting. And be it further resolved that the board president is authorized to execute an agreement with Tetra Tech Architects and Engineers for such architectural services upon approval of the same by the school attorney.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion, Laura?
Just a question, the proposal was really nicely laid out. In the pre-referendum planning portion of their proposal, they talk a lot about communication and engaging the community and all that, which is fantastic. I'm just wondering if there is typically an intersection with the communications committee, or if subcommittee, the architect, if they sort of manage all of that, or if these are sort of cross-referenced things that board committees need to jump in on as well.
Well, I'd say that's really up to us. If we want them, say, to attend several meetings of the facilities committee, then they'll be there to do that. If we want them to attend a meeting or meetings of a community advisory committee or whatever, they'll do that. For those of you who are familiar with the last project, when we had we had a communications firm cranking all that stuff out. That didn't come from our architect. That came from the construction management firm. And that's another step in the process, even though this isn't going to be a $24 million project with a bunch of new instructional space. It's kind of the next thing on our list is to look at the possibility of construction management, because even a $5 million project is nothing to sneeze at, and I'm not sure that it would be a good idea for Sheldon, as capable as he could be, to construction manage that project. I mean, that's not what he does, and he's got a lot of stuff to do on a daily basis without that. So we're going to have to look at that as another step in the process. I would be surprised if anybody's going to give us a communications consultant as part of their package, given the potential expense of this, this project. But we may decide that we may have to go out and find somebody who has expertise in that area, as opposed to me or the communications committee or the facilities committee trying to do that kind of work. I mean, that's, there's expertise involved there that I don't think any of us have. I don't feel comfortable taking that on, because that's not my, I'm not trained to do that either. So we may have to seek some help from some third party to come in and put together the graphics and all that stuff.
So you're not anticipating that Tetra Tech is...
I'm not anticipating they are. They may be able to recommend people to come in and work with us, but I don't believe that's in the scope of their work to put together and implement a communications plan going forward to promote. Well, we wouldn't say promote, but to advertise the project to the public. I think that's somebody else's work, especially given the size of the project. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, they said they would be providing all the information and everything that we need, and they've been doing it in a lot of school districts. So they did tell me, we could just take samples of what other districts have done, and we can very easily mimic what other companies have done. He says it's really kind of easy to do that, but they told me they would help out in any way possible, because to them, they need this passed as much as anybody else, because they don't get paid if it doesn't pass. So he did say they would be very helpful in the communication part of it. Not that they have somebody on their staff who this is what they do, but he said it could cost anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on a smaller project like this. And he says in a lot of school districts, they do it themselves, because there's so many examples out there that everybody's doing. It's kind of, well, geez, I like that. Well, you can fit yourself to that stuff. It doesn't take a real consultant to come in to start from scratch and build up. This isn't like you're trying to sell a new building or something. This is kind of it's a basic one. It's to sell it to them. It's about the infrastructure, and you don't want it to go, because it ends up costing a lot more in the end. So, but I'll talk to him tomorrow to get a better understanding of that aspect of it, which will be helpful for the communication committee and that definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a final reading the adoption of new board policy number 8334, use of credit cards.
So moved?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a first reading the consideration of modifications to board policy 5300, district code of conduct.
So moved?
Second?
And Diane?
A couple questions, actually.
Sure.
So this actually kind of a big change, modifications here, I would say. Currently, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to cigarettes, the student has to actually be smoking a cigarette, for that to be an issue. And in here, they're saying it would be possessed instead of being. Can you just, does that mean holding, having in pocket, is that like backpacks, and just, what is that? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, all of the above, all of the above are possessing. Now, there are obviously restrictions in terms of search and seizure. You can't just arbitrarily search a student without, without reasonable suspicion is the standard at this level, not probable cause, which is what, a police officer would need. So, I mean, it's not like we're going to be patting down kids to see if they have cigarettes on them, but, if a kid's found to be in possession, then, again, this is the recommendation of our building principals, because they're dealing with that more than maybe they have, and then the whole vaping things is something that they're dealing with on a more regular basis.
And do you know if the committee's considered the cell phone being able to be used in between classes? It's not, right now, it's not according to the policy, so this would be for high school.
Like in the hallways, you mean?
Within that 3 minutes. Right now, they're currently not to use it, I think unless you're using public music. So that's something that comes up with parents as texting, cell phones is part of everyday life.
Yeah.
Is that something, right now it's not allowed, is that?
Yeah, it didn't come up during the discussions of this committee. I mean, I'd be glad to ask, especially our, middle school and high school principals, if they have any thoughts about that. But it didn't come up in the conversation as part of this process.
And the last question was out there, so they added, on page 9, they added the part from state education about having problems in testing.
Yeah.
What is our procedure for that? So a lot of our testing happens after school is ended, so they don't have a locker.
Like during Regents Week?
Kids have these phones with them, what do we do with them?
Yeah, my understanding, and again, I would want to double check with, especially with Ed and with Mark Berg, but my understanding is they have to leave them at the door. I don't know whether they have a basket there or a box, but you got to put them there. They're outside the door, or they're in the office or whatever, because according to the state education department, if you got it on your person and it rings, now you've got a problem. You're not supposed to have it with you when you're sitting in that seat in the gym taking a Regents exam, even if you're not doing anything wrong with it. So my understanding is excuse me?
They're secure.
Yeah. They leave, my understanding is they leave them at the door in some kind of a container, and then they pick them up on the way out after the exam.
Laura?
I also have a question on page 21,
Okay.
referrals, part B. I'm just curious about the definition of incorrigible.
Yeah. That's why I was up there.
I might call my daughter incorrigible on any given day. I'm wondering what the committee's thinking in terms of that, and how they define it.
Why they
in terms of.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember where that came from, and
That looks like statutory.
yeah, it may be. That's why I've got to have to go back and check my notes and just refresh my memory as to where that came. But I'll have that information for you when we take this up again in 2 weeks.
It's not replacing a word, it's just.
No, I know. Yeah. We'll find out for you and let you know.
Anything else on code of conduct? Yes, go ahead, Lisa.
All right, so I have two things. Let me deal with the less substantive first. There are a couple of spelling errors on page 9. Section 14G, that's the new
Yeah.
material that Ann referenced. So in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line, I think that word should be bringing and not bringing.
Yeah, of course. That's something you do with a turkey on before Thanksgiving.
And then 1, 2
Okay.
lines down from that, I think it should be location where a local final exam is being held.
Yes.
Not local.
Yep, thank you.
So that's easy.
Okay.
All right, so now I would like to go back to the previous page, and that is section E, that is section E11. And just to put this in context, this is a section that is talking about situations in which students may be subject to disciplinary action up to and including suspension from school. And section E talks about conduct in which it talks about students engaging in any conduct that endangers the safety, morals, health, or welfare of others. Examples of such conduct include, and so 12 talks about smoking, and the new material is and/or possessing a cigarette, cigar, pipe, or using chewing or smokeless tobacco, or possessing/using an e-cigarette/vaping. So I want to say first that I am no fan of smoking and have good understanding of its dangers and how we wish as a board to discourage our students from smoking and from using tobacco products generally, and they model that behavior. I think we do a good job with that, and also teaching them about those dangers. But having said that, I am uncomfortable with the idea of subjecting students to discipline, or the potential of discipline, for merely possessing tobacco products. And my reservations are twofold. The first part is that, as I understand it, it is not unlawful for people under the age of 18 to possess or indeed to purchase tobacco products, although it is unlawful to sell people under the age of 18 tobacco products. So I have an issue with the school subjecting students to discipline, or at least exposing them to the potential of discipline, because I understand that the principals have a great deal of discretionary latitude to impose discipline. But nevertheless, to exposing them to the possibility of discipline for doing something that it's legal for them to do. More significantly for me, though not necessarily ranking them objectively, is that this code of conduct is a speaking document to our school population and also to the parents of our students. And whatever our personal feelings about tobacco products are, there are people in this community who use them. And I am not so happy with the idea of our communicating both to our students and their parents that not only is it unhealthy and a bad idea generally for the students to possess that material, but also that we will punish them, or we may punish them. And I can foresee the possibility of some pushback from members of our community who think it's none of the school's business to be punishing their kids for the possibility that a kid may walk into the school building with a pack of cigarettes in his pocket, not smoking it, not using it, not giving cigarettes to anybody else, but simply having it on his person. And I hear what you're saying about not patting people down, but that's not something that will probably spring immediately to the minds of the students. or necessarily to their parents either. I sooner see this issue be dealt with in a positive way, in a, the discouraging and the behavior we don't want, but also encouraging people to do things that are more in their interests, rather than suggesting that students are bad or their parents are bad for doing this. So I recognize the impulse. I applaud in some respects the impulse to try to keep tobacco products away from students, but I think this is not the right way to go about it. It's too broad and it's really intruding on areas that we shouldn't necessarily be intruding on.
All right, other questions? David?
I'm really glad you brought that up. Lisa, I think it's really, I think that I'd want to consider what you're saying more. I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but, I'll just share that. I remember my first meeting of the school board many years ago, and I was just really shocked at how long this document was. And what does that communicate? Now, these many years later, I realize there are all sorts of legal reasons in part for having everything written out so clearly, and also, a real serious guidance for our administrators. And I think our administrators in general use their discretion well around the range of possible disciplinary actions over time. But I think there can be, and I want to thank the committee that gets together annually to review it, and the refinements have been made, often have been very helpful. But I do hear what you're saying, and what kind of, I'm torn, because I also feel like, well, it's really, if there's one thing we know is really, really, really bad for your health, it's cigarettes, right? We don't even have to have the discussion about that. Red meat, maybe we wanted to talk about, or this or that, but cigarettes, yes. And you pointing out that it endangers the safety, morals, health or welfare of others seems a little problematic. I even had earlier looked at that maybe it could have its own section on we want to promote healthy behavior, rather than suggesting that you're endangering other people's morals. So, I just am saying that I really respect what you're saying, and I feel like I would want to consider that as well. I think, are we over-regulating behavior in a way that can lead to discipline?
David?
So I guess in some ways, these questions that are being raised though are much broader than what we're being asked to act on tonight, right? Because we're just being asked to, in a way, look at the new language that's been introduced, and the implications of some of what you're saying would be for a group to be evaluating the entire code of conduct with some of the kinds of questions you're putting forward. So, which I don't necessarily see as problematic. But in terms of our own actions tonight, are we being asked really to approve the suggested changes and amendments?
We are, yeah.
Yeah, as a first reading.
Yeah. Okay, as a first reading, so this could in fact go back to that group and
It could, more than likely, if the majority of the board had an issue with a section or sections of what the committee is suggesting be added, then I would think in the short term, we'd take that out until the committee, I'm not going to be able to pull that committee together in the middle of the summer. We need a code of conduct that's viable to use starting on September 7th. So again, if there are parts of these suggested changes that are objectionable, I'd be more inclined to pull them out upon the second reading, before the second reading occurs, and take it back to that committee and say, okay, here's what got voted in, here's what got at least temporarily removed by the board or the majority of the board for further consideration. We could always bring it back, or could drop it, or could come up with some different language. I'm just in the timeline wise, we have to have a code of conduct that's ready to go at the beginning of September, so.
Deirdre?
Well, I think it would be helpful to me to know what, you mentioned maybe something about more incidents that Ed, like what is Ed Davenport, what's the issue that he sees? And how often, what is that like on the ground? And in addition to that, to Diane's question around use of cell phones between classes, even that's been not permitted according to the code of conduct, but I also had that question about kids are often, like pick me up after I'm not staying. I like the idea of trying to minimize how much kids are just distracted by phones. Look, we all need that, but they also are just part of everyday life. So maybe a report from Ed on those things could help us.
Either directly or via me.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
Diane?
No, but I'll say something later.
I hear what you're saying too, Lisa. I know that we discussed this once upon a time in policy, but I think, and I don't know the law on cigarettes, although I don't know how you can, so you were saying you can purchase it? If you're 18,
It's
but you can't
unlawful, it's
sell it.
unlawful for the purveyor to sell them.
Right, but how can you purchase it?
If the police officer came in, he could cite the store owner for
Right.
selling it. He cannot cite the under 18-year-old person who purchased
But
it.
no one can sell it to you, so that's illegal. So anyway, but there's a lot of things in here that are legal or acceptable in the world that are not permissible in school. I'll take just an example of a t-shirt with profanity on it. Many parents are okay, they buy those shirts for their kids, they're okay with them. They're legal, you can wear them anywhere you want, no matter what age you are, but they're not permissible in school. So I guess I would take that opinion that, cigarettes, tobacco products have no place in school, regardless of their legal status outside.
Well, but the question isn't whether people should bring cigarettes into school. The question is whether we are going to authorize our administrators to discipline students who do bring them into school, if they're not using them in the school. Because I'm certainly not arguing with the idea that students who smoke in school or vape or use other tobacco products should be subject to
And that
discipline.
might be a question for Ed, because I know if they're wearing something inappropriate, they'll ask them to change it. So if they find a cigarette, what will they do with it? Will they take it away, or will there be detention? I mean,
I agree with that.
that's,
You should ask him about that.
All right.
And maybe he would say that he doesn't really need to be able to discipline students. He just needs to be able to take
them away.
use as appropriate action, short of discipline.
And remember, there's, to that point, there are a wide range of disciplinary responses to all of these infractions, and they typically run from things like a warning to a more serious punishment, if you want to use that term. But I'll get some more information from that. I mean, that's a fair question, certainly.
Deirdre?
One thing I have noticed that often in communications with families, students, that the principals will invoke board policy, right, as a kind of a standard for expectations for behavior and conduct. And I think that's an important part of the work that administrators do. They have the ability to point to board policy, so it isn't just an arbitrary exercise of authority or selecting out people who, could be perceived to be unfairly being described as breaking rules. That the policy is, well, you're on the policy committee. The board policy exists in a really important way to communicate those expectations. So hearing how the policy works for Ed and doing his work, it seems useful, really useful.
All right. I just wanted to, I had a flash of insight as I'm sitting here listening to the conversation, going back to page 21, the incorrigible question. As we were going through the policy, and this wasn't a suggestion that came from anybody. I think one of the parents on the committee raised the question about PINS petitions. And that's the section that part of page 21 refers to. And what we decided was, well, we better look at Mark said, I think the PINS petitions regulations might have changed since this was, last tinkered with. So I said, well, Mark, do me a favor, get me the PINS language, and we'll at least make this consistent with the way the language is currently. And that's where those additions came from, including the word corrigible. Now, exactly what the definition of that is, that's part of the standard that the school district has to meet in order to refer a kid to, by law, yeah. So that's where, that wasn't our tinkering with the law or overreaching the law. That's what the law says, for better or for worse. And nobody would excuse legal language for always being the clearest and easiest to understand. So that's where that came from.
So I guess then the follow-up question would be, in terms of referring to, for a PINS petition, how do then our administrators use this word to then file a PINS petition?
They'd have to get some legal guidance on that for a particular case. My only point is, we want to make sure the language reflects what the law is currently, and it has changed apparently over the last 10 or 12 years, or whenever the last time we even dealt with this in this policy. So this reflects what the law says right now. In terms of actually putting it into practice in the real world, we do what we do now. We talk with somebody from, I'm trying to think of what agency manages PINS petitions. And, we're not, if we've had 3 PINS petitions in the last 10 years, that's probably a lot. I mean, it's not something we're dealing with every, once a week, every week. So it's a rare occasion, but we would talk to our legal counsel. Is this suitable for a PINS petition? Is this proper for a PINS petition? We have, I know they have contacts down at sure it's Department of Social Services. There's an agency at the county.
CPS.
Child Protective Services, okay. That's the intake agency for a PINS petition. And we always call them anyway. Here's our situation. What do we got? Do they meet the standard or don't they meet the standard? And it wouldn't be the first time that they told us that they don't meet even before the word incorrigible came to be invented, they've told us, no, that's not, that doesn't meet the standard, or, you know what, they're 15 and a half, by the time they get through the system, they're gonna be 16, you can't PINS petition them anyway, so don't waste your time. I mean, that's how it works in the real, in our real world, as we talk to the people who are gonna deal with this kid, take the kid to a judge, where a judge says, okay, you're incorrigible, you're not doing anything your parents tell you, you're not going to school. I mean, there's a process. So now we're putting you under the watch of the court, because the school can't do anything with you, your parents can't do anything with you. We have to put some structure to your life. What that means in a courtroom to a judge, I guess that's up to the judge to make that call. But that's where that language came from. We didn't sit around in a room trying to think of ways to beef that up. That's right from the law. I remember that after we had moved on to some other topics here, so.
Our
just wanna answer that
conversation made
question.
you think about.
It did, I'm.
Incorrigible.
I-
Suddenly you're like, now I get what incorrigible is.
It put me in a totally reflective mood, I will say that.
All right, any other discussion on this motion?
So, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So going back to section E14.
Right.
No, I'm sorry, E11. So what are we, I guess I need to what's this procedure? You're going to take this up with Ed?
Here's the procedure I would suggest to you. Do it as a first reading. It's not policy until you second read it. I will go back to Ed and Mark specifically because they deal with most of these situations on a regular basis and get them to answer the questions. What's the issue? Why did again, what's the impetus for your wanting that language changed? What disciplinary action would you typically take with possession of tobacco? And then I'll come back to you with their responses. When you do a second reading, you can either decide to read it as is or say, you know what, I'm making a motion to read it with this language taken out, to be taken under the advisement of the committee. If that's the way the majority of the board wants to roll, that's fine too. I don't know that it requires throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater, but if there are things that a majority of the board is not comfortable with, then move it without that language, and we'll deal with that through the process as the year goes forward. And just because, practically speaking, I'm not going to be able to get this resolved with a parent and teacher committee in the middle of the summer. It won't happen. So that's the process going forward.
All right. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a mini grant in the amount of $200 for the purchase of supplies for the BMS moving up ceremony as stipulated.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? We'd like to thank the PTSO for their donation. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of additional advisors and mentors for the Bulkley Middle School for the 2016-17 school year.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Rachel Rinaldi to the civil service position of typist assigned to the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School, effective July 5th, 2016, on step 1, $33,704 in accordance with the Annie salary schedule for 2016-17 with a 26-week probationary period.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to abolish the position of elementary teacher assigned to the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School effective July 12th, 2016.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? Joe?
I just want to point out to the board, that's the position that we're not filling by going to 3 incoming kindergarten classes and having 4 fifth graders move on, 4 classes of fifth graders move on. It's just, we have to make that as a motion, and that you may recall that requires notification to the RTA, and they get 60 days to discuss with me options to not cutting that position. I mean, in this case, nobody's losing a job, and there's also no remedy because we're doing it on the basis of reduced enrollment in the incoming kindergarten class. But you have to approve that we're deleting that position, so that's why it's on your agenda.
Okay. All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Megan Kraft as a long-term substitute in the position of elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School effective September 1st, 2016 through June 24th, 2017 at the pleasure of the board at the salary of Step 2 MA plus 12, $61,417 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17. This appointment is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Jackie Diedrich, elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School.
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the provisional appointment of Carrie Keegan to the civil service position of guidance aide assigned to Bulkley Middle School effective August 1st, 2016 on step 3, $39,158 in accordance with the Annie salary schedule for 2016-17.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa?
I'm just curious about the linguistic difference between motion 6.7 and motion 6.10. 6.10 refers to a provisional appointment.
Yes.
Whereas 6.7 just refers to an appointment.
That's correct. That's what I was just going to point out to the board. Thank you for raising the question. This position is the one being vacated by the retirement of Deb Wasilchek in the middle school. There is currently no civil service list for this position. So when there's no list, you have to wait until there are names on a list. But we obviously can't not fill the position. So in that case, you appoint somebody on a provisional basis. There's no probationary, 26-week probationary period. She's basically serving at our pleasure until A, there's a test, B, she takes a test, C, she scores in the top 3 on the test. So that's the situation that she's in. So it's a provisional appointment, it's not a probationary appointment.
Thank you.
All right, all those in favor?
Did I get that right, Tom?
Unanimous? That motion passes.
Yep.
May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the list of additional emergency conditional substitute teachers and substitute non-instructional staff for the 2016-17 school year?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes.
Just as a sidebar to that one, this is to provide our ability to pay her as a substitute for several days while she shadows Deb Wasilchek before Deb actually rides off into the sunset, as it were. Okay.
All right, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve additional summer 2016 curriculum work?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's all except Fleischhauer and one abstention, Fleischhauer. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve a leave request under the Family and Medical Leave Act from Stephanie Baird to commence on or about October 28th, 2016, with such leave to be taken as paid medical leave through the period of disability as certified by a physician in writing to the extent of her accrued sick leave, and thereafter such leave to be taken as unpaid child care leave through the conclusion of the 2016-17 school year.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes, and I believe we have no executive session.
No, just one comment if I could. I anticipate a number of personnel appointments at our next meeting in addition to the director of special education. There are a few others. Just a heads up that we want to get those folks appointed at the next meeting.
All right, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Motion's always unanimous.